Well, we made it. We're almost there. Day 3, CES, Brand Innovators, Vegas. So everybody doing all right? We hanging in there? A little more energy left? Wonderful. I myself have a strict 3-night policy in Vegas that I'm violating this week, so wish me luck. If you see me out tonight, just point me in the right direction. All right, so I couldn't be more pleased to share the stage today with 2 absolute superstars in the industry. Before we get into some more proper introductions, though, I just wanted to quickly thank Brand Innovators for another world-class event, so thank you very much. This is perfect. And we're going to be talking today, as you see, the challenger mindset, innovative ways to engage with the consumer. So we're going to be getting a lot of insight today from our esteemed panelists. So first, just really quick introductions. My name is Dustin Cook. I'm with InMarket. If you're not familiar with InMarket, we've been around for about 14 years, and we are a digital media and measurement platform, real-time, industry-leading. Really, what I'm here to do today is to facilitate the questions to the talent here. So let's get into that with some more formal introductions. So first, Lisa Giacosa. Lisa, why don't you say hi to the group and tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Hi there. I've got a weird accent because I'm British, but also lived in Australia and now lived in America for 12 years. So let's get that out of the way first of all. I'm Chief Investment Officer at Spark Foundry and Connect at Publicis Media. And what I think makes our approach a bit different is that I have worked on the client side, so I've been in your shoes, as well as coming up through agencies across the globe, working in Asia Pacific, as well as in EMEA, and then obviously now in the US. Hence my global and US role. And I think what makes me a little bit different is that prior to being in the current shoes that I'm in, the last 3 years of being Chief Investment Officer, I was the President of Data, Tech Analytics and Insights. So I bring all of the power of data to the investment environment. And so I think that gives us a little bit of differentiation. Wonderful.
Also, Drew Panayiotou. Why don't you say hi?
So I've had a chance to help launch Beats by Dre, which is was a challenger brand, GoPro, when I was at CMO at Best Buy. And so I've had a chance to work on the best and biggest brands, and I've also had a chance to kind of grow emerging brands or challenger brands. And one of the funnest brands, too, is Chick-fil-A. So between Chick-fil-A, Beats by Dre, GoPro, Disney, Coke, Dr. Pepper, it's been just an awesome experience, so it'll be fun to chat about whatever you want to chat about, but being a challenger brand.
Well, let's start with the challenger mindset and challenger brand. So, you do a little bit of Googling, some internet searching. There's obviously no unanimous definition for the challenger mindset or challenger brand, but you do get a lot of keywords and phrases that come off quite often. So disruptive, innovative, differentiated, laser focused on a purpose or mission, and then of course confident, undaunted, and scrappy like a startup, which I think we talked about a little bit during our prep session. So with that said, no common definition. What does it mean to you to be a challenger brand, and how are you guys trying to really inject that into your respective organizations?
Okay, I'll start. I actually think that every brand, big or small, has to be a challenger brand. And I say this because, I worked at a company called Kodak, which used to be big. My son, I have a 10-year-old son, he'll have no idea what that is, right? Your dad was a marketing director at Kodak, but I've worked for Google, right? And Google's mentality is that they'll go bankrupt like any given month because the business will change dramatically. And so I think you have to be willing to have a mindset where you're playing to win versus playing not to lose. And I think to me, that's ultimately the real definition of a challenger brand and challenger mindset is, am I playing to win or am I playing to defend and not to lose? And if you play to win, then you're a Beats by Dre, you're a Google, you're a Dr. Pepper, right? Because Dr. Pepper is the ultimate challenger brand. It's like now the #2 brand in the U.S. in soft drinks, and no one ever thought that would happen. But you have to constantly have that focus and desire to win versus protect territory.
I love it. What would you add, Lisa?
I would say everything that Drew said in terms of being a challenger every day. You mentioned scrappy and startup spirit. That is what we pride ourselves with at Spark and Connect, is that we started out as the smallest agency in Publicis Group. We were the small little conflict agency and became that little engine that could. And what we pride ourselves in is that there is no trade-off when you work with us. We have the power of Publicis Media behind us, so we have, an enormous amount of clout in the market. But also, we have not lost that scrappy startup spirit. So we are get your hands dirty, roll up your sleeves, and think every day differently, and understand that ideas can come from anywhere, whether that be someone that's the janitor or someone who's super senior. And so always challenging ourselves to think outside of the box and think differently, and challenge ourselves to always go outside of our comfort zones. Is one of the first things I say to any of my mentees is, if you're not uncomfortable, you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So that to me is part of that startup and challenger spirit.
That's great. And speaking of being uncomfortable, when I think of these challenger brands, one of the other common threads that seems to come out is that they've found a way to get uncomfortable and to get into real hyper relevance with whatever audience that they're looking to approach. How do you do that? How do you get good at that with small brands, big brands? How do you become hyper relevant to all those folks that you need to influence?
I think it ultimately starts with really knowing what you stand for, and then who you really are wanting to have as a customer. What it's you're not selling, you're mission driven. And I remember this. Particularly at Best Buy, when we were working with Beats, there was a determination of the person who really appreciated sound that was different, and a real, and it came from Dre, who worked with Jimmy Iovine, but there was this intense understanding of that kind of person who wanted to have that kind of audio sound in their head. And I say that same thing is true at Dr. Pepper. I was having a conversation this morning with someone, is Dr. Pepper knows exactly who it's going after and who the center of gravity is for the brand. It's not football, it's college football, right? And I think when you get big, you sometimes lose that focus that a Jimmy Iovine had on Beats, or a team has like Dr. Pepper, where it's this is exactly our customer. This is the person who really is the heart of our brand target. And that's when magic happens. And you can get surprisingly big, because I remember when I was actually with Chick-fil-A for 4 years, and I'd spent a lot of time with Dan Cathy, the CEO, and it was amazing, because when you look at a business like that, compared to McDonald's, right? Chick-fil-A came out of nowhere. Each Chick-fil-A unit is half the size of a McDonald's unit and does double the revenue. And I'd say the magic of that is because they were really sharp in terms of where to put a store and where their raving fans were. And they actually used this term, and it would show up in a lot of the marketing documents. They'd say, we're about creating raving fans. And that guided the whole organization and company. And that's why they're kind of the envy of QSR. And I think when you understand your raving fan, it's such a powerful word, because your raving fan is the person who's going to talk to other people about what they love about your brand. And you have to get to that. And when you get to that, man, it's such a powerful thing to have. It's a powerful thing to accelerate the business, and it's where magic happens.
Wonderful. Lisa, what would you add?
And I'll go at it from a more, again, everything that you said in terms of, knowing when you're a challenger is knowing where you want to play, and also importantly where you don't want to play. And then where I would come in is I would come and talk to Drew and say, okay, now let's find those people. So you just heard from Epsilon. We would use the Epsilon data to find real humans and start with the right data to understand who they are, where they are, do they have the potential to be a raving fan, could they actually influence people, and then find them in the real world across multiple platforms and reach them and talk to them in the right way with the right moment of receptivity. So understanding and starting with the right data is critical, as well as knowing where you have the right to play and where you don't want to play as well.
Totally. And it's funny, when you do that, then you don't actually have to discount your brand. And I didn't realize this, and it's funny because as I think about this conversation, but when Beats launched, there were no coupons, there's no discounting. It was this is our brand and it's awesome. and we believe in it. And the same thing's true, actually, surprisingly, of a Chick-fil-A. When do you ever see a Chick-fil-A coupon? Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. There's no deal because you have those raving fans. And if you think about an industry like QSR, which is just coupon, 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 it's pizza deal, it's $5 off. That's when you realize, do you have raving fans, and do you have that kind of challenge or energy where people just love you and are willing to kind of like pay what you believe the value proposition's worth, and so it really is interesting because then it changes the way you go to market, it changes the way you buy media, connect with customers, the stories that you tell, and the more that you can actually put into brand building. And I think the same thing true in our industry is, you see that with Red Bull, right? You see it with Pepper, you see it with brands that have found a way to get that to that core.
And I get really excited with challenger brands as well because, there's that nervousness initially that, budgets might not be as strong as bigger brands, and how are we going to get our right share of voice? And the reality is that with the data we have available today, with the platforms and the way we can buy on big screen, we can make brands feel much, much bigger than they actually are by using the right data, reaching them in the right environment, and also having that big screen experience. So it feels to the raving fan or the core consumer like a much bigger campaign than it really is. And then that gets people to then feel much more familiar with the brand. And then also looking at how you're tracking that. So when you think about brand perception and brand studies, do you care if someone that's not your customer or your consumer is aware of you? If they're not someone who's going to have the propensity to buy your product. So apply the same rigor and data to how you track your brands as well. So you can do amazing brand studies programmatically targeting your precise audience versus looking at general population. So you can start apply a lot of much more data rigor to understand the true targets and the true potential of your growth market versus looking at the entire general population.
Totally. You said something that I think people miss, like with today's technology and the ability to be, that's an interesting, because Publicis they use the word connect, like I use the word omni, is you can feel really big when you know like who your raving fan is, because now we can advertise through connected TV. We can have ad units that go right to Amazon Prime or to an online video network, and you can make the brand feel big. And so it's actually not about channel choice. I think a lot of marketers talk about, well, if I'm going to be a challenger brand, I'm going to focus only on these channels. Actually, I think you focus on only these customers, but you're omni, because you can be in video, you can be in social, and then you think about, again, you walk away from this notion that my job is about advertising. My job is not about advertising. It's about creating these connected experiences. And so if I want to connect with customers on TikTok, leverage creators to actually create engaging content on TikTok. We shouldn't be running ads necessarily, right? Let's run ads in the right, online video network where if someone's watching a program, if I'm watching YouTube TV, I can deliver what is more of a traditional ad unit that has a different purpose. And I think that allows you to kind of achieve that bigness, but it's targeted.
And that's all due to the context and the relevance and getting it right, not only with the who and the what, but certainly the when and the where, which you guys have touched on. And
we were talking the other day about the notion of, we used to say test and learn, and we would do a little test. And by the way, when you say you're just going to do a test and learn, what do you feel? Do you feel comfortable or uncomfortable? You feel comfortable, right? Because you're not pushing outside the comfort zone. You're doing a test. Whereas if you launch and learn, you go at it with a different type of rigor, and you can do it discreetly in big channels that feel big, with the data that enables you to then launch and learn and move really quickly and make braver decisions. When you do a test and learn, it was just a test. So if it fails, it was like 10% of the budget. It was set aside for testing anyway. But when you launch and learn, you put a different mindset on it and a different set of rigor that enables you to actually then move more quickly, take it slightly more seriously, and impact business more quickly as well.
It's interesting to say that, because I totally agree. Like when I was at Coke, I helped start the Venturing and Emerging Brands group, and so we went and studied entrepreneurs that created brands, and we're like, why are they successful? And they were successful because they just constantly launch and learn. They don't have the ability to buy big, expensive studies. They can't go buy Cantor trackers. And I always say this, like, you buy all these studies, but what entrepreneurs do is actually like, hey, I'm going to put it out there in the world, and then I'm going to let the world kind of guide me and get me to the right place. And it's surprising because I think that's what tech companies do. When I was at Google, it was the same thing. It's like, let's put it out there. Let's have the world, tell us what it is, what it should be. And it's that mentality of like launch and learn. And I think it totally flips the model of research and insights and doing theoretical studies. And, I always laugh at the notion of focus groups because the world is our focus group. We don't need to call 20 people into a room in 5 cities. It's like the world is our focus group.
Well, that's
I'm laughing because I was with Clive Sirkin. I don't know, you probably do know who Clive Sirkin was. He used to be the CMO of Kimberly-Clark and the Chief Growth Officer of Kellogg's for a while. And I used to work for him at Kimberly-Clark. And he used to have this analogy about focus groups, and he used to call it cupcake research. And the way that we would talk about it while we were at Kimberly-Clark together was, you're doing cupcake research because, put your hand up if you have incontinence. Anyone? Not self-identifying? It's 1 in 2 of you, by the way, by the time you're over 50, and 1 in 4 of you right now, just FYI. But the reality is that, you have to think about it in a much different way. And the reason we called it cupcake research is that he used to go and take his daughter for a cupcake every week. She's now at university, so that makes me feel really old. But if you ask a kid, how is a cupcake? What's the ideal cupcake? You want a lot of icing and frosting and a tiny bit of cake. But if you eat that all day long, you're going to be sick, right? It's the same with focus groups. Is anyone, like, what have we got out of focus groups usually? I want it cheaper. I want more of it. I want it to be higher quality. Like, I can tell you what a focus group will tell you. But if you watch the behavior of people, so when I was at KC, we did behavioral science groups where we watched the behavior of people that were suffering with incontinence. And rather than asking them, they'd say, everything's okay, I'm fine, I can carry on. But when you watch the behavior, you saw them go inside themselves and different things happen. And we got different insights that enabled us to go to market as a challenger brand in a very different way.
We're going to transition off incontinence, right? If that's all right. That's cool.
You don't want to put your hand up?
So, Drew, back to something you were saying a little bit earlier about entrepreneurship.
Incontinence, no.
No.
You drink too much.
Yes.
So at KDP, you just recently announced the exciting acquisition of Ghost. So, obviously a fast-growing challenger brand in the dynamic energy drink space. Talk to me a little bit about how that reflects KDP's view on the challenger mindset and how you have to kind of move forward.
Yeah, I think Ghost is like that perfect example of a brand that knew exactly who it was for, what their products were about. And, it's interesting because having, a 10-year-old son and a lot of people in my house that are, 18 and 19, you realize like they were focused on gyms. They started off with, powders and then created beverages. And I was telling this to some people today. They're not widely distributed, right? They're not. You can't walk into, a lot of the food, drug, and mass and pick up a Ghost beverage, but yet, we bought it for $1 billion because it's a powerful brand, but it's a powerful brand with this audience of people, and that brand can grow, but it's a healthy brand because it started off with a really good foundation. And has huge upside. And I think, again, it goes back to this, we love brands like that. It goes to me feels a lot like, Dr. Pepper, where it's like, this is the brand. It's got a unique personality. It speaks to a certain mindset. And I think, when you speak to mindsets and you're not afraid to have that mindset, you become like an amazing brand. And I think that is, again, part of this challenger mentality is like to get to that mindset, you have to be willing to experiment a bit and play. And I think I was reading an article the other day and it made this comment about, it was in the press and it talked about, Dr. Pepper versus Coke. And, it said Coke is, for this generation of have a Coke and, smile, and then it said, well, Dr. Pepper is really resonating with a younger Gen Zennial that is more around have a Dr. Pepper and a little smirk, And that's what someone else wrote, but it does talk to this mindset of, hey, you can have a little bit of a quirky, different personality, and that does show up in our advertising, right? In college football, the stories around Fansville, it's a little bit, offbeat and humorous, and I think it goes back to this whole point of just, if you have that ability to take a little risk, speak to a certain mindset, you can start off small and keep growing and growing and growing, and then get to be pretty big. And I think that's awesome, and I think that's what some of these brands can do, like Ghost.
We had a great conversation during our prep call last week just about the launch and learn, which I love, Lisa, and the idea of just Drew of putting things out there fast and seeing how they do. Like with technology, we've never had a greater ability to put things together and get them out in the marketplace and get instant consumer feedback. Tell me a little bit from a measurement standpoint. How do you do that? We're moving so fast. Is the measurement that you're using kind of keeping up with that real-time need to get feedback from consumers? And if so, how?
Do you want me to go?
You can start, and then I will.
I think, listen, there's multifacets in measurement. The holy grail for me is getting over the hump of being afraid to share data in a clean room, because that's going to get you to truly understanding end to end, from someone understanding you right the way through to transaction and repeat transaction. That's the holy grail: closed loop measurement in a clean room and getting to connect it to transactions. Now, understanding that not everybody is able to do that or wants to do that, and we still have walled gardens, right, that are going to prevent that. We have to go back to some of the different ways that we used to measure, like MMM. MMM is having a massive resurgence, but I would say, there are different things that need to happen with MMM in your methodology to ensure that you're getting to the right measurement, and that's going to be a slower moving metric, right? So when you start to do your MMM, you need to think about the way that how fast your brand perception works, how fast that changes, because oftentimes we've been doing brand studies every quarter or every 6 months or even sometimes every year, and you can miss a lot. A brand can change a lot. And also, when you're moving in a faster environment, you need to look at different faster proxy metrics that move at a much more dynamic pace. And so we talked the other day about the notion of a funnel. The reality is, I guess I play a hands up game a lot because I want to see if you're listening to me. Put your hand up if you bought something off Instagram. Had you heard of that brand before? Keep your hand up if you had. Oh, look at that, right? You all bought something from Instagram before knowing the brand.
So that's not the traditional funnel?
That's not the traditional funnel, right? So the notion of using old school measurement to measure today's purchase cycle is different. And so we have to shift our focus. So it was a nice framework for us to think about, but we have to shift measurement to fit with that as well. So there are indicators like, how much people are engaging with it, how many clicks to purchase you're getting, all those sorts of things that you can use as proxy measures in a much faster paced environment.
And, go ahead. And I would say there's not the perfect ROI model. Actually, I think going back to challenger brands, you have to have a longitudinal mindset, longitudinal data set. And so I'm a much bigger fan on return on marketing objective, which is like, what are we trying to do? And it could be related to where people are in the funnel. But I would say this because I was, again, very impressed by the folks at Beats, and I was there in the early days with Jimmy Iovine, and he would, I was not the raver, but I'd go into clubs and go into these parties that he would throw with Dr. Dre with like groundswell of people, and I'm like, these guys would just be in a certain part of the city, and what's the ROI on that? How do you measure that? Well, you don't measure that with sales at Target the next day, but over time, building that authenticity, building that kind of community, then does translate into sales. And so I think the inability for us to kind of look at the marketing objective and look at the longitudinal data, you fall into this trap of last click attribution. And I think that's where, we have, and I know this because I helped launch the first retail media network at Best Buy. There's a danger to looking at media networks and being pulled into a last click attribution model, which is like, I'm advertising here because this is where the product is sold, and I'll over rotate on that. That can really harm brand building, and I actually think it makes it tough for brand builders that have to look at building authenticity, trust, and engagement, because it could take you to the wrong place. They're great, and again, I helped launch the first one, but it goes back to what's your marketing objective.
It's great. I mean, you're always investing in a measurable outcome, but it may or may not be ROAS in that situation, right?
I think the other framework you have to think about is measure what matters. Like, am I measuring this because I can measure it, or am I measuring it because I should measure it, right? And so, again, with MMM, it's a look back at what you've done. If you haven't done it before, it's not going to tell you what you have to get in market, and you can't wait for 9 months to see that play out in a model.
Exactly. And every MMM model I've seen, there's two important factors. Content drives success, and content is a experimental journey at times, because great creative is not always linear. And the second thing is when you integrate paid, owned, earned, and shared media, and we can call that omni-channel. But when you do both those things well, there's always ROI. And so that's why I think how you measure and what you choose to measure is incredibly important.
Well, I had the easiest job in town this week, getting the two of you to share. We're already 2 minutes over, so I think we have to wrap it up here. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's fun. Thank you.
Dustin, Lisa, Drew, thank you so much.